as we heard, it wasn't just they were in their own private psychodramas, which turned in global politics, world diplomacy into a playpen tantrum. That they hadn't really seemed to think through where they wanted to be with a peace plan in Ukraine. I was about to say in Russia, because it's Russia's peace plan, and how this is going to work is more mysterious than ever.
Let's go back to the world's biggest story right now. Following his mauling in the Oval Office yesterday, Ukraine's President Zelensky will no doubt be enjoying the more hospitable surroundings of 10 Downing Street this afternoon as he meets with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The meeting comes ahead of tomorrow's summit of European leaders who are arriving in London to discuss an end to the war between Ukraine and Russia. Now, those talks have taken on an even greater significance after the extraordinary scenes at the White House yesterday, which saw the Ukrainian delegation effectively thrown out of the building after a photo op/press conference in the Oval Office in front of the world's media descended into a heated row between President Zelensky, President Trump, and his Vice President, J.D. Vance.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?
Times.
No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Normally, that sort of thing just makes me cringe, but I could listen to hours of that. That was just extraordinary. We didn't even hear Trump going off at him as well. The ugly scenes in the Oval Office not only torpedoed the deal over Ukraine's rare earth minerals, which would have given the United States a reason to maintain security in the country, but it also threatens the continued supply of American military assistance, which have been vital in helping Ukraine keep Russian advances at bay. Let's first of all talk to Robert Fox, who's the defence correspondent of the Evening Standard, about all this. Hi there, Robert.
Hello.
I don't know how closely you've been tracking President Zelensky's movements. We know he's landed. Do you know where he is right now?
Well, I think he's been having a bit of R&R, a wash and a brush up before he goes over to Downing Street for a quick chat with the Prime Minister. And what he must talk about, of course, what they both have to talk about, was can they game out the meeting so it just doesn't get blown off the rails, as happened in the White House yesterday, where there was a lot of unscripted and there didn't seem to be much planning. That's the most interesting thing, I think, on all sides there from yesterday, is that one would have thought that Zelensky would have gamed through what was going to happen, have a frame in his mind as to what he wanted. But both of them were, both parties were off-piste and off-script.
It's such a huge contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, yep.
I was just saying, a huge contrast to the way that Keir Starmer's meeting went off with such a success. They obviously knew the limits and parameters that would be touched on in their press conference. And I just wonder whether the Ukrainian delegation weren't as skilled in that sort of pre-meeting Sherpaing and negotiations that perhaps the French and the British are.
I think they're exhausted, the Ukrainian delegation. I think you're absolutely right to point to that. No, they're not. They probably can't put as much skill and manpower, but the way Starmer put it together, it was obviously with a great deal of assistance from two people he particularly trusted with this one, namely the new British ambassador, Peter Mandelson, and Jonathan Powell, the national security advisor, who is going to be the most powerful, or is already proving to be the most powerful national security advisor of modern times. In other words, giving that particular position real focus and point. And we know the French are extremely capable of planning and very wise. And of course, Macron and Starmer had the wit to keep each other posted all the way along, before, during, and after, almost, as it were. And that's why they are going to be tomorrow the two principals, because their planning teams will already be together. They'll be talking to Metz, and they'll be talking to trusted smaller allies, smaller in that they represent smaller populations, but people that they've really come to trust, like the Norwegians, the Finns, amazingly enough, the Dutch and the Danes, and they have big input. Can I point out that the Danes have just upped their defence budget to over 3% of GDP?
I mean, it's extraordinary. We can expect that the European leaders will, of course, be putting their arms around Zelensky. But do you think we're going to get some concrete announcements out of these heads of state on the back of this meeting, or is it just going to be more talking shop?
I hope not concrete announcements just for the sake of it. And I think we've had a bit too much of that, because one would have hoped there was some real thinking and discussing going on behind the scenes. And there's something, I'm sorry to say, as we heard, it wasn't just they were in their own private psychodramas, which turned in global politics, world diplomacy into a playpen tantrum, that they hadn't really seemed to think through where they wanted to be with a peace plan in Ukraine. I was about to say in Russia, because it's Russia's peace plan, and how this is going to work is more mysterious than ever. The narrative, as you notice, is that, oh, the one who must be laughing his socks off about this is Vladimir Putin. I think not necessarily so. He wanted a path to peace out of this, and his real hope and expectation was, with the new warmth and friendly face in the White House, that it was a peace that he could dress up by Victory Day, May the 9th, in Red Square, as a victory in Ukraine. All that's all over the place, and as we heard from your correspondent, there's been another massive drone attack overnight, and the war goes on. Russia, almost as much as Ukraine, wants an operational pause now. It has to. Can't go on losing 45,000 personnel from the battlefield every month. And so that it's all to play for. So I hope there's a lot of thinking and planning to answer your question again, but I hope not too many vapid announcements.
Defence is your beat, it's your area of expertise. When it comes to American support on the battlefield for Ukraine, that is the big concern about I imagine it is the big concern in Ukraine, and we'll be going over there very shortly to discuss it. But do you think we are going to see some announcements or just some lack of interest in continuing to support Ukraine on the battlefield, given the relationship now between Zelensky and Trump?
By whose part? On the part of America?
America essentially withdrawing their support.
Exactly. No, I get you. I think that Europe will step up. It can't fill the gap. But, as we have seen up to now, there will be these JV, joint ventures, to produce drones and so forth, at which not only the Ukrainians, the Poles, the Brits even have become very, very good indeed. But Ukraine produces more battlefield drones, as we know, than the rest of NATO put together at the moment. I think there will be a step up, but I think there is a big question behind this, which you've been hinting at throughout this interview, and quite rightly. What is Europe going to do, which it will have to do more or less alone? Not to use concrete, vapid statements as we've been talking about. I think it knows it's got to be more detached from America. It has been a dream. It was a dream of de Gaulle. It was a dream of the founders of the European community leading into the European Union. But back in the 50s, they had a thing called the Western European Union. I'm afraid, to coin a terrible old cliche all over again, there will be a coalition of the willing. And I think that's what the European partners, and very likely Japan as well, and Australia and Canada, will be talking about a new coalition of the willing to keep Ukraine going, for fear of encouraging Russia from going on doing what it is. Full frontal attack, but it is the covert attacks, it's the encroachments that have been so widespread, from Georgia to Moldova to the North Sea to the Irish Sea to cyber attacks. They know that they've got to deal with it. And by the way, so do the American planners in NATO. I wonder what Mr. Trump is going to say to them. Are they going to sack them as well?
Well, let's see what happens. Robert, thank you for your time. Robert Fox, defence correspondent of the Evening Standard. You are listening